Hello everyone, this is Patrick from Pomo FCC, and it's time to do one Pomodoro of FCC, which is 25 minutes of free code camp, something I try to do every day, hopefully. Let's go ahead and see what we're working on today. We're going to be doing applied visual design. Let's see, there's quite a bit left in here. Might be able to finish this in 25 minutes, might not. We'll see. Let's go ahead and start the timer and get into it. Alright, learn about complementary colors. Alright, color theory and its impact on design is a deep topic. I think I read this last time. Yeah, I did read this, so let's just go ahead and get into the challenge. Change the background color property of the blue and yellow classes to their respective colors. Notice how the colors look different next to each other than they do compared against the white background. So we're just going to change this to, actually we can change it in code, right? This is red, green, blue, so we could do FF. That'll be blue, right? No, it's green. Red, green, blue, duh. So FF, then yellow. What's yellow in? No, I think they need us to change it to the actual name, so we'll just do blue. And then we'll do yellow. There we go. You can see how they complement each other, they go well together. Of course, any of you Michigan football fans out there will enjoy that. So let's go ahead and run the test. Alright. Computer monitors and device screens create different colors by combining amounts of red, green, and blue light. This is known as the RGB additive color model in modern theory. Red, green, and blue are called primary colors. Mixing two primary colors creates secondary colors. That's what I was talking about in the last video. So cyan's green and blue, magenta is red and blue, and yellow is red and green. You saw these colors in the complementary colors challenge. The secondary colors happen to be the complement to the primary color not used in their creation. So cyan and red, and then it would be magenta and green, and yellow and blue. Tertiary colors are the result of combining a primary color with one of its secondary neighbors. For example, within the RGB color model, red and yellow make orange. This adds 6 more colors to a simple color wheel for a total of 12. There are various methods of selecting different colors that result in harmonious combination and design. One example that can use tertiary colors is called the split complementary color scheme. The scheme starts with a base color and then pairs it with 2 colors that are adjacent to its complement. 3 colors provide strong visual contrast and design but are more subtle than using 2 complementary colors. Here are 3 colors using the split complement scheme. Change the background color of orange, cyan, and raspberry classes to their respective colors. Make sure to use the hex codes, not the color names. Okay, so we're just going to copy these. Orange, we're going to place in orange. Cyan, we're going to place in cyan. And then raspberry, place in raspberry. There we go. Those look pretty good together. Run the test. There's plenty of color wheels online you could use to find tertiary, complementary, various color schemes. The next challenge, just to color various elements to complementary colors. The complementary colors challenge showed that the opposite colors on the color wheel can make each other appear more vibrant when placed side by side. However, the strong visual contrast can be jarring if it's overused on a website. It can sometimes make text harder to read if it's placed on a complementary colored background. In practice, one of the colors is usually dominant, and the complement is used to bring visual attention to certain content on the page. This page will use the shade of teal as the dominant color, its orange complement to visually highlight the sign-up buttons. Change the background color of both the header and footer from black to the teal color. Then change the H2 text color to teal as well. Finally, change the background color of the button to orange. Okay, so this is the teal. They want us to change the background color of header and footer to that teal color. Alright. Footer. Teal. Change the H2 text to the teal color. Go. And then finally change the background color of the button to this orange color. Okay. As a Miami Dolphins fan, this is pleasing to the eye. um, Probably wouldn't be something that I would go with for page, but yeah, definitely a stands out. Although this could be hard to read for somebody. All right, run the test, and that passed. To the next challenge. Okay. All right, just the hue of a color. Colors have several characteristics, including hue, saturation, and lightness. CSS3 introduced the HSL property as an alternative way to pick a color by directly stating these characteristics. Hue is what people generally think of as color. If you picture a spectrum of colors, starting with red on the left, moving through green in the middle, and blue on the right, the hue is where a color fits along this line. In HSL, hue uses a color wheel concept instead of the spectrum, where the angle of the color on the circle is given as a value between 0 and 360. Saturation is the amount of gray in a color. Fully saturated color has no gray in it. Minimally saturated color is almost completely gray. This is a given percentage, with 100 being fully saturated. Lightness is the amount of white or black in a color. A percentage given ranging from 0, which is black, to 100 white, where 50% is a normal color. Here are a few examples of HSL with fully saturated normal lightness colors. So red is HSL 0, 100%, 50%. Yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. Okay. Change the background color of each div element based on class names. Green, cyan, blue using HSL. All three should have full saturation and normal lightness. Okay, so this is just another copy paste. We're going to pick green over here. All right, paste it here. Here we go. Cyan's here. Paste it here. And then blue's here. Paste it here. There we go. Easy peasy. Run the test. There we go. Alright, adjust the tone of a color. HSL option in CSS also makes it easy to adjust the tone of a color. Mixing white with a pure hue creates a tint of that color, and adding black will make a shade. Alternatively, a tone is produced by adding gray, or by both tinting and shading. Call that the S and L of HSL stand for saturation and lightness. The saturation percent changes the amount of gray, and the lightness percent determines how much white or black is in the color. This is useful when you have a base hue you like, but need different variations of it. All elements have a default background color of transparent. Our nav element currently appears to have a cyan background. Because the element behind it has a background color set to cyan, add a background color to the nav element so that it uses the same cyan hue as 80% saturation and 25% lightness values to change its tone and shade. Okay. So copy this and then paste it here. And they want 80% saturation. See how that changes a little bit right here. You see this is now a little bit darker. And then the lightness, we're going to change to 25 and it should darken up a little bit more. There we go. Got a nice little hue of the same color there, or tone, I guess you could say. So not a bad way to create little subtle changes in colors. Create a gradual CSS linear gradient. Applying a color on an HTML element is not limited to one flat hue. CSS provides the ability to use color transitions, otherwise known as gradients, on elements. This is accessed through the background properties linear gradient function. Here's the general syntax. You got background, linear gradient, gradient direction, color 1, color 2, color 3, etc. First argument specifies which direction the color transition starts. It can be started as a degree, where 90 degree makes a horizontal gradient left to right, 45 makes a diagonal gradient from bottom left to top right. The arguments specify the orders of colors used in the gradient. So 90 degrees, red, yellow, and then this color. The use of linear gradient for the div's element background and set it from a direction of 35 degrees to change the color from this hex to that hex. Alright. So we're going to do background, linear, background, here, gradient. I want 35 degrees, and from CCFFFF to FFCCCC. There we go. And you can see it goes from bottom left, bluish, to a pinkish up here. Okay. That worked. Use a CSS linear gradient to create a striped element. A repeating linear gradient function is very similar to a linear gradient, with the major difference that it repeats the specified gradient pattern. Repeating linear gradient accepts a variety of values, but for simplicity, you'll work with an angle value and color stop values in this challenge. The angle value is the direction of the gradient. Color stops are like width values that mark where transition takes place and are given with a percentage or a number of pixels. For example, demonstrating the code editor, gradient starts with the color yellow at 0 pixels, yellow, which blends into the second color blue at 40 pixels, right here. Since the next color stop is also at 40 pixels, the gradient immediately changes to the third color green, which blends itself into the fourth color red that's 80 pixels away from the beginning of the gradient, which is yellow. So it's 40 pixels from green. Okay. For this example, it helps to think about color stops as pairs where two colors blend together. So yellow blend to blue, 40 pixels, and then green blend to red to 80 pixels. Okay. Every two color stop values are the same color. The blending isn't noticeable because it's between the same color, followed by the hard transition of the next color, so you end up with stripes. Make stripes by changing the repeating linear gradient to use a gradient angle of 45 degrees. Let's change that and see how it changes. Okay, so it's diagonal stripes. Okay. Then set the first two color stops to yellow and then black. So we'll go yellow here. See how it changes. Okay, so you get solid yellow for 40 pixels. And then black here. Black here. And now you got a striped yellow and black box here. It's pretty cool. Run the test. Yo. Next challenge. Create texture by adding a subtle pattern to a background image. One way to add texture and interest to a background and have it stand out more is to add a subtle pattern. The key is balance, as you don't want the background to stand out too much, take away from the foreground. Background property supports the URL function in order to link an image, the chosen texture or pattern. The link address is wrapped in quotes inside parentheses. Using the URL of this, set the background of the whole page with the body selector. So we're going to do background URL. I'm going to put quotes in here. I'm going to copy this, paste that in there, and you can see it gives you like this kind of strange texture. It's kind of hard to see probably on the recording, but it's like, can't tell if it's like spirals in there or what, but it definitely changes the background. Right. Use the CSS transform property to change the size of an element. Change the scale of an element. CSS has the transform property along with its scale function. The following code example doubles the size of all paragraph elements on the page. So transform scale 2. Okay. So it's like a multiplier. Increase the size of the element with ID of ball2 to 1.5 times its original size. So we would do transform scale 1.5. And there we go. You can see it gets bigger. So it's a multiplier. So if you change this to 3, it'll be 3 times bigger. There you go. Okay, so 1.5 done. Transform property ball 2 should be set at scale 1.5. Is that what I did? Transform scale 1.5. Huh. Interesting. 1. It's strange that this one is not passing. Oops. Let's refresh here. 1.5. That's what they asked, right? 1.5. Transform. Scale 1.5. Oh. The semicolon is where I was messing up. There we go. Don't forget your semicolons in CSS. Use a CSS transform property to scale an element on hover. Transform property has a variety of functions that let you scale, move, rotate, skew, etc. your elements. When used with pseudo classes such as hover that specify a certain state of an element, transform property can easily add interactivity to your elements. Here's an example to scale paragraph elements 2.1 times their size when the user hovers over them. Applying a transform to a div element will also affect any child elements. Okay. Sorry, I had a yawn there. Add a CSS rule for the hover state of the div and use the transform property to scale the div element to 1.1 times its original size. Okay, so the div hover transform scale 1.1, and then it should get a little bit bigger when I hover over it. There it goes. I believe there's a transition you can add in here too, where it'll transition like slower. It won't be instantaneous, so you'd actually like watch it grow. All right. Use the CSS transform property to skew X to an element along the X axis. Next function of the transform property is called skew X, which skews the selected element along its X or horizontal axis by a given degree. Following code skews the paragraph element by negative 32 degrees along the X axis. Skew the element with the ID bottom, which will probably be this square, or rectangle, by 24 degrees along the X axis using the transform property. So we're going to transform skew X, capital X. I'm going to do 24 degrees. And there you go, you see it skews. The top moves to the left, the bottom moves towards the right in that example. So if you do negative, does it do the opposite way? Yeah, okay. So that's how you make a parallelogram or a rhombus. This should pass. There we go. Alright, next challenge. We got use the CSS transform property skew Y to skew an element along the Y axis. So given that skew X function skews the property along the X axis, is no surprise skew Y property skews an element along the Y axis. Skew the element ID top negative 10 degrees along the Y axis. Okay. Transform skew Y negative 10 degrees. And there you go. See, it skews it along the Y axis. And this should pass. Oops. Got my semicolon again. Alright, next challenge. Use or create a graphic using CSS. By manipulating different selectors and properties, you can make interesting shapes. One of the easier ones to try is a crescent moon. For this challenge, you need to work with a box shadow property that sets the shadow of an element, along with border radius property that controls the roundness of an element's corners. You will create a round, transparent object with a crisp shadow that is slightly offset to the side. Shadow is actually going to be the moon shape you see. Okay. In order to create a round object, the border radius should be set to 50%. You may recall from our earlier challenge that box shadow property takes values of offset x, offset y, blur radius, spread radius, and a color value in that order. The blur radius and spread radius values are optional. Manipulate the square element in the editor to create a moon shape. First, change the background color to transparent. I'm going to change, let's see, I'm going to do that last because I want to see how this changes. So then set the border radius property to 50% to make it circle. So 50%. Okay, so here you see the box shadow right here, and then here you see the actual element. Finally, change the box shadow property to set the offset x to 25 pixels. There it is. The offset y to 10 pixels right there. Blur radius to 0. You see how that changes. It no longer blurs it. You now have a solid piece. Spread radius to 0, which should make it smaller. There we go. And the color to blue. So it's going to disappear here for a second. It's going to look like you have 2. But when you change the background color to transparent, boom, there's your crescent moon. What you're actually looking at here is the shadow of this transparent circle. It's pretty cool. I'm sure you can make it by, if you make this smaller, it'll look thinner. Not 155, 15. Yeah, see? 5. So you get a thinner crescent moon there. Pretty cool, though. Alright, so in the test, go. Alright, create a more complex shape using CSS and HTML. One of the more popular shapes in the world is a heart shape. In this challenge, you'll create one using pure CSS. But first, you need to understand the before and after pseudo elements. These pseudo elements are used to add something before or after a selected element. In the following example, a before pseudo element is used to add a rectangle to an element with the class heart. So heart before content. I don't understand what that is. Background color yellow. Border radius 25%. Position absolute. Height 50%. 50 pixels. This is like an offset at the top and left. This is before. But what is heart? Is heart like a div? Yeah, heart is a div. So before heart. Alright. So the before and after pseudo elements to function properly, they must have a defined content property. This property is usually used to add things like photo or text to the selected element. When the before or after pseudo elements are used to make shapes, the content property is still required but is set to an empty string. In the above example, the element with the class heart has a before pseudo element that produces a yellow rectangle, the height and width. This rectangle has round corners due to its 25% border radius and is positioned absolutely at 5 pixels to the left and 50 pixels above. Okay, so that's what the negative is. Transform the element on the screen to an heart. In the heart after selector, okay, so where's the blue? Okay, here's the heart after. Your border radius, your absolute 50 pixels. Right here, left. Okay. I'm going slowly here because before and after is something I've come across before when I was learning CSS, and it's still kind of I never really quite understood it. So I'm trying to like visualize like step by step how it changes, because that helps me understand exactly how it works. I mean, I know the general idea of before and after. Put this before it, put this after it. But I think what confuses me is that you're dealing with an empty div to start with, which is which kind of messes with my head a little bit. I see we only have 10 seconds left in this palm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this because I need a refill on coffee and our timer's up. So let's go ahead and end it here, and then we'll be back tomorrow to create this heart and hopefully understand it a little bit better. Thank you all for watching. This is Palma FCC, where I do 25 minutes of free code camp every day, hopefully. We've already missed a couple of days, but you know what? We're just going to keep on rolling, keep on chugging along. So if you happen to watch this, thank you for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.